Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, you might notice that I am in yet another new location. So at the moment, I'm up visiting my good friends Laura and Josh in Hamden in Connecticut. So we will be doing some sit-down reviews while I'm here and filming some out and about videos and things like that as well. So I hope that you guys enjoy the little Connecticut mini-series of things that you're going to see over the next little while. But Josh was very kind and picked out a few beers for me to try while I'm here, so we're going to kick off and have a little look at these and see what we think. So yeah, the first brewery that we're going to have a look at this time is one that I have never reviewed anything from before. These guys are one of the quite well established Connecticut breweries as well, from what I understand, and their beer is very highly thought of, and their artwork, I have to say too, is very nice. So quite cool to be able to feature these guys for you here on Rampant Lion Reviews for the very first time. So for this review, we are going to go a little bit south to New Haven, and we're going to go a bit to the east of the centre of the city, and that means that we're going to have a look at my first beer from Armada Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Fortune Raider. It comes in at 8.3% ABV, and this one is a double IPA. So yeah, this brewery just kind of caught my eye because of the artwork and things. I thought it was pretty interesting, and as I always do when it comes to a new brewery that I've not seen before, I just pick the one that I like the name of the best, and I thought Fortune Raider with this kind of old school scuba suit, I thought that was pretty damn cool. But yeah, let's see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a wee bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do in the future, hopefully from Armada Brewing. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist, along with a number of other things, and we are adding to that quite regularly at the moment, I have to say. But yeah, check out the playlist of beers from other countries too, because there are some really interesting things up on the channel these days. But yeah, let's go to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Armada Brewing Company. So Armada Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in New Haven in Connecticut, and the company was founded back in 2017 by John Kraszewski. So he started home brewing back in 2012, and he was inspired to get into brewing beer during his time in Chicago, having been immersed in the beer culture of the city. As you know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, and if you're an American beer fan, Chicago is a really pretty damn good beer city these days. A ridiculous number of breweries up there. But he said that he really wanted to take some of the Chicago beer scene home with him to his home state, and he had moved home with his family not long after that. So they started Gypsy Brewing at Overshores Brewing Company in East Haven, and they sold their first beers commercially in January of 2017. And over the next few years, John continued to build up the sales portfolio of the brewery, and they started to plan to have their own facility. But in the early days, he was helped by his partner, who's Alexandra Ivanova, and his child apparently took part in the brewing as well and things like that, but they took on a little bit more staff as time progressed. But in 2022, they opened a new brewery on River Street, which is just, as I say, to the kind of east of the centre of New Haven, and they apparently had a bit of a duel with a filmmaker company called Gigantic, who wanted to build a number of sound stages in the district, and yeah, there was quite a little bit of things with the local government and stuff like this, from what I understand. But this site that they now occupy has a tap room down the stairs called the Throne Room, and they have a larger space up the stairs called the Queen's Lounge, which they use for events, and they've got 20 odd taps in both of these venues, from what I understand. But the art on the cans is the work of Squat Buon Cristiano, and the logo that you'll see here, I think it's down at the bottom of the can, it's quite clever. It's basically a ship's bell with the hop flower inside, and it's meant to be that the little bell ringer essentially means that the hops resonate out to the public. That's the idea behind it. But the bell is, of course, meant to look like an A, which is Armada Brewing too. But as of September 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 70 different kinds of beer across according to Untappd, and their stuff seems to be pretty solidly rated, I have to say. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Armada Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So this can, incidentally, is a 473ml one, which is 1 American pints or 16 fluid ounces if you want to talk about freedom units. I'm still not overly familiar with that, I have to admit. But yeah, 16 fluid ounces, and as you can see, the artwork on this one is beautiful. I think it's really, really cool. I just noticed actually, if you put it through the thing, it actually looks a little bit like a wolf or a monster or something if you focus on it here. But yeah, really nice art with this one. You can see he's found some kind of mad skull or something at the bottom of the sea. There you can see the Armada Brewing Company symbol that I was talking about earlier, and then you've got a plain silver top on the can there, which looks great. But yeah, really nice looking artwork and stuff on this one. You can see on the back there, Fortune Raider, and this is 8.3% ABV. Oh, there's one of those lanternfish things there as well, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I think there's been a few different versions of this beer. When you look it up on Untappd, it's listed as 8% ABV, and it is supposed to have Citra and Simcoe in it. So we know those hops quite well, both of them American. Simcoe's going to be about 12% alpha acid, give you really kind of soft passion fruity note, and Citra is about 14% alpha acid. Good little bit of grapefruit, nice pungent passion fruit, some juicy mango, and also some kind of lemon limey character. Sometimes a little bit of lychee and gooseberry and stuff too. But yeah, really nicely presented beer, this one, I have to say. Let's have a look at this. The Fortune Raider, and 8.3% New England, or well, that just says double IPA from Armada Brewing in New Haven here in Connecticut. Let's get this one out and into the glass. There we go. I think that'll do for the moment, just while we have a little look at it. There is still a wee bit left in the can. But yeah, let me just line that up so that my OCD is happy and the video looks nice. And there we go. So, as you can see, this beer is poured with over a finger of quite a soapy, bubbly, kind of cream coloured head there. You can see like medium-sized bubbles on the surface of the liquid there, but big soapier ones above that. That head is going to fade away quite soon, I would think. But this beer, to me, it does look a little bit more like a kind of New England hazy IPA, but it may well just be a kind of American. So yeah, the main difference between the West Coast IPAs and the New England IPAs are that the New Englands use a bit of wheat and oat in the malt base, whereas the West Coast ones just use a little bit of barley, or use barley. It's not unheard of to use a bit of oat or wheat in there, but yeah, mainly barley malt base. But there is a new kind of in-between these days called the American IPA, which is just, you know, a little bit of a mixture. You know, sometimes they can be a little bit more bitter, and they'll have a little bit of the sweetness of the West Coast IPA, but they have the mainly kind of creamy malt base. But yeah, this one does look more like a New England hazy or maybe an American IPA. So the colour to the naked eye is a little bit different to what I'm seeing on the camera there. I think it looks a little bit brighter to you guys, but this beer for me is a kind of murky, sort of light brown amber kind of thing. But yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect it too. But when it comes to IPAs, it's very rare that you have to care about that, to be honest with you. As we said earlier, not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and a few big ones just going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks pretty much as you would expect from an IPA. As I said, this one kind of looks more like what we would just call a kind of American IPA rather than being specifically New England or West Coast, but it leans more toward the New England side of things, of course. Yeah, I don't think we need to say any more about the appearance of the beer. Let's have a wee look at the aroma then and see what we get with this one. Oh yeah. This is quite interesting. The malty backbone of this beer is quite it's actually quite sweet, to be honest with you. This beer doesn't have too pungent an aroma, in my opinion. It's actually quite, yeah, it's actually quite relaxed, I would say. That's kind of interesting. But when you sugar the beer up a little bit more, you do obviously start to get more of the green component coming out of it. You get more of the fruit, and you get more of the, yeah, you do get a little bit more of the kind of malty side of things. First impression of it is that it's quite floral. It's actually got a fair little bit of like brown sugar to it as well, and the brown sugars remind me of Maris Otter malt from England. And it's got quite a little bit of juicy, fruity character as well, and almost a little bit of a kind of citricy note to it. Yeah, it's quite interesting. It has got a wee bit of like an almost acidulated malt type aroma too. But yeah, let's try and break it down and just describe it a wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of the beer, absolutely, you've got a little bit of like a fresh white bready bread crust coming out of this one, like a kind of fresh hedgehog roll. That's absolutely there. You've got a nice little bit of like crackery character in there as well, and some nice kind of woodiness. So yeah, nice little bit of cracker, a nice little bit of woodiness, and then above that you start to get some different bready characteristics. There is white bread in there, but it has a little bit more greeniness to it, this beer, for me, and there is a little bit more of a kind of wholemeal brown bready type character coming out of this one for sure. You can definitely get a little bit of wheat out of it. In the back of the nose you can smell that little, you do get that little kind of bitey, wheaty character coming out of this one, which I think is great. And then on top of that, there is a little touch of oatiness there, but it doesn't seem that this beer has too much in the way of oat, to be honest with you. This one really strikes me as being more kind of wheaty leaning, and yeah, more wheaty and barley malt leaning. And as I've said, when it comes to, if we consider this a New England IPA, for me there are 6 elements that you can think about. There can be the farmhousey yeasty character, the rye leaning grainy side of things, and those are a bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs than they are in other parts of the world. But you've also got the wheaty bitiness, the oaty creaminess, the barley malt bread, and to a degree the sweetness. These are the 6 things for me you have to think about when it comes to the New England style, actually. And to be honest with you, the more that I smell of this one, the more that it strikes me as being a slightly kind of like, it has a little bit of that kind of farmhousey, saison-y type character to it, a little bit of an almost kind of funky type note, but I think it's quite wheaty leaning at the same time as well. So yeah, this is quite interesting. This sort of beer reminds me of Alchemist Brewing from there away up in Vermont. I forget the name of the town, but yeah, the first kind of New England IPA I encountered like this was Alchemist, and also it reminds me a little bit of yeah, it reminds me a little bit as well, aroma-wise, of Lawson's Finest. The Lawson's Finest ones were kind of like this too, from what I remember. But yeah, you do get a little bit of oatiness out of this one. There's a wee bit of like a creamy character from the oats, and you do get a little bit of dryness. As I've often said, when it comes to oaty character in these kind of beers, it's usually a very good indicator of how fresh your beer is, because essentially the creamier the oats are, the fresher the beer is, the drier the oats are, the older it is. That's kind of how it goes. So yeah, definitely a little bit of that. I am getting quite a little bit of like Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type note out of this one too. So yeah, to be honest, I think we've said everything we need to about the malty side of the beer. This is quite interesting. On the hoppy side of things though, you do get a little bit of, you get quite a big green component out of this one. So when it comes to hopping, there are 3 types of hoppings you can do. Early addition hopping, which if we use a 90-minute wort boil as our model, that takes place within the first hour of the wort boil, gives you mainly bitterness and quite a deep and dank aroma. Late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil give you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma, and that will translate to like quite a bright floral character. Dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, gives you completely flavour and aroma, and then also, yeah, and then it's also going to give you quite a nice, yeah, it is also going to give you quite a lot of fruitiness as well. New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs use all 3. I get the impression from this one that there is a bit of early addition hopping in here as well, because you get a little bit of earthiness out of it. There's a nice little touch of like floral, and there's a nice little touch of herbal quality as well, but it's got quite a big, bright floral aromaticity to it, and it's quite deep and dank as well, actually. But yeah, big, zesty, grassy component coming out of this one too, which is most likely to come from the Citra. And then yeah, the fruity characteristics are kind of what you would expect. It's got a really, for me, I get a lot of lemon and limey character out of this one, mainly lemon. If I didn't know the hops that were in this, I would guess that there's maybe a little bit of Centennial in there. But I'm also getting quite a little bit of a kind of like melony, limey character. So Cashmere is one that would come to mind as well, to be honest with you. As I say, the hops, the listing that I saw for this beer was, it was the one at 8%, so they could well have changed the recipe of this fairly recently. But the aroma of this one does make me think Cashmere. I'd be very curious to know. But definitely get a little bit of a stronger grapefruity note out of the beer. Passion fruit and peach for sure. There is a bit of a juicy mango, but not much. But like I say, I'm getting quite a little bit of a lemon and lime and kind of melony type note out of this one. It's really interesting. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think we should have a taste of this one then and see what it's all about. This is the Fortune Raider, an 8.3% IPA, double IPA from Armada Brewing in New Haven in Connecticut. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah. Now, it's got a really interesting impact, this one, because when you take it in, it does have a little bit of a kind of sharpery, citricy type character to it, but then when it mellows out, you get quite a lot of like brown bread and sweetness and graininess and stuff like that. This is really interesting, actually. I had a little taste of this the other night, but to try it with a fresh palate is quite interesting because it just comes out completely differently. Yeah, this is interesting for me. Like, it has, I think, just stylistically, from actually tasting this, I think it's absolutely fair to call this one, it is fair, definitely fair to call this one an American IPA rather than calling it specifically New England or West Coasty, because it definitely has a bit more of the kind of sweetness and things that you would expect of the West Coast IPAs, like a bit of the kind of brown sugary note. And it does have a little bit more kind of bitterness to it at the same time and a bit of dankness, but still, it's still got quite a lot of the smoothness. So I think calling this one an American IPA rather than specifically New England or West Coast with it, it's almost like some of the, I've seen mountain IPAs and Colorado IPAs as well, which always seem to be somewhere in the middle too. Kind of reminds me of those. But yeah, let's break the flavour of this one down a wee bit more and describe it for you more in depth. We'll start on the middle third of the palate as we always do, but this is good. I like this. A nice, solid introduction to Armada Brewing. So yeah, the backbone of this beer, middle third of your palate, you get that kind of wholemealy, like brown bready, grainy bread crust there. As you move further forward toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of woodiness and things in there as well. Definitely a wee bit of like a Jacob's cream cracker or something the further into the aftertaste that you go. And that is nice. I do like that about this one for sure. Yeah. So the way that goes together is really quite nice. But on top of that, you do start to get this, like, there's almost like a little touch of a rye bready character to this one as well. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a wee bit of rye in this. This is one of the things that the American breweries don't have to do in certain states. They don't have to list the ingredients, and I'm pretty sure this one's here. You know, it doesn't tell you whether it's got rye and stuff in like that, but just from the way this one is, I wouldn't be surprised if it did. Just noticed a wee thing that's cool in the can there as well. They've got the state outline, drink Connecticut beer. I think that's quite cool. But yeah, I would not be surprised if this beer does in fact have a little bit of rye in it, because you do have this quite grainy, rye bready bread crust coming out of it So yeah, I like that about this one. So you can feel that you've got a rye bready bread crust, what feels like a little bit of a kind of rye bready character above that. Then you start to get a more wholemeal brown bready note, and there's a wee bit of a white bready character above that. Like it's quite layered in the middle third of your palate for sure. But yeah, above those bready layers, you start to get the kind of brown sugary sweetness out of the beer. But in fairness, above the white bready layer, you can feel, I think there is a bit of wheat in this one, because at the top of the bready character, you can feel the wheat sort of densifying out the beer, and I find wheat often has that. Wheat often has that effect. One thing I have found as well is that in these American brewed beers, is they seem that the kind of bready character is just that little bit sweeter as well, actually, and it's just the American malts. But the wheat is a lot smoother. That's something else that I'm noticing in the beers that contain wheat. You can taste that the wheat does densify out the beer, but it's just American wheat is a bit smoother, I think, than European wheat. So that's another interesting observation. Above that, I think there is a little touch of oatiness. It wouldn't surprise me if this beer didn't have oatiness, but within, just on top of the wheaty layer, there's almost like a little circle there where you get this very slightly kind of creamy, almost creamy oaty type note. And as you move out toward the edges of your palate, it just feels that little bit drier. But definitely above that, you've got the brown sugary notes coming out of this beer, which is really nice. But yeah, the brown sugary side of this beer, I mean, this one is 8.3% ABV, so it needs a little bit of sweetness, or it needs a little bit of sweetness to kind of balance out the alcohol, and you know, alcohol does have a little bit of this kind of brown sugary taste for sure. So in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel that little circle there where it's like a really concentrated, very sweet caramel. That's your alcohol, of course, but as you move further out toward the edges of the palate, you get a little bit of a kind of like Werther's Original butter candy butterscotch, and you also get this kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity type note as well. And like I said, that sits on top of the kind of oaty and the wheaty layer there. So say the middle third of your palate in this beer is very, very layered actually. But it's nice, like I say, American IPA, because of that brown sugary character and the green component. This beer really should be called an American IPA, not a New England, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that covers the middle third of the palate then. So back third of the palate. As I've often said, the back third of the palate will give you similar flavours, and you will notice a trend on your palate that the sweeter flavours come out further forward, the more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. But yeah, on that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build-up in there, a wee bit of brown bread underneath, a wee bit of white bread on top. The bread crust that's in there feels a little bit drier and more grainy for sure. The rye bready character, you can feel that in there, but it feels a little bit lighter and more airy. And I would say that layer isn't quite as tall. But yeah, as you move up from that, you get the fluffy wholemeal brown bready character, then the white bready character, and both of those feel quite tall and quite airy. And you can feel a little bit of the wheaty character just creeping over the top of that and giving you that wee bit of wheaty bitiness at the back of the palate there, on that back third of your tongue. On top of that, you do get a really nice, on top of that, you get a very nice, like, you get the yeasty character starting to push its way out of the beer. That was the word I was looking for. Brain just wasn't working there. It's my brain fart for the day. But yeah, the above everything else, you start to get that really nice kind of yeasty character. For me, the yeasty character in this beer is like quite a sweet and dense wholemeal brown bread. You can just feel that in the beer, and that goes together really quite nicely. Around that, you get a little bit of like woody and kind of crackery type character, and then you've got that. You've just got a little bit. It's kind of wrapped in a bit of honeycomb. So that yeasty character for me sits on top of everything else. That sits on top of everything else in the on that back third of your palate. So yeah. But yeah, that's really nice. Definitely the back third of your palate, the flavour is taller, and as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, I think that covers the malty and yeasty side of this beer. But this beer really has a little bit more of that kind of rye, grainy, sort of farmhousey character that I've found in some New England IPAs, such as like Lawson's and Alchemist that I mentioned before. This is interesting. On the hoppy side of things then, let's go to the green component. Back corners of the palate, there is a little touch of earthiness in there, which is quite interesting. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and as you push further forward from that, you can feel there is a little touch of like a piney, resinous character coming out of this one, but then it's more like floral and aromatic and slightly spicy as you reach the front corners of the palate for sure. But round the front curve of the tongue, it's definitely lighter and more grassy, and has a wee touch of zestiness to it as well. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together for me in that regard is really quite nice. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the green component, to be honest with you. So let's have a wee look at the front third of your tongue and the sort of fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a nice little bit of that bready build up in there. Brown bread in the base, white bread on the top. Then at the base of that front third of your palate, yeah, sort of rye bready bread crust, wee bit of rye bread, sweeter brown bread, and a wee bit of white bread, but mainly the sweeter brown bread. And then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters from the hops just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, for me, the fruity side of this beer is really interesting. Really oily fruity character actually as well. I would stick to that. So at the back of that front third of your palate, and this is an interesting thing because hops will always behave differently depending on what yeast and what type of malt that you use them with. For me, this beer, it really has quite a little bit of, it's got a wee bit of like melony and kind of orangey character for me. Yeah, it's interesting. So at the back of that front third of your palate, there is a wee slight hint of like grapefruit in there. Not too much. Then it kind of gives you a more oily sort of passion fruit. And as you move toward the kind of front of that middle third of your palate, you get a bit of a juicier but quite oily mango. And these are all things that would fit with Citra and to a degree Simcoe. But underneath you do get very slight, like dry apricot. You're not getting the sharper peachy note either that I was picking up in the aroma, and I am getting like a little bit of melon. This beer does still make me wonder a little bit about cashmere. Cashmere is a hop that I've encountered a few times. In Europe, it's mainly grown in Slovenia, and it's very distinctive. It can kind of dominate a beer. And there is a wee touch of that melony character in this one, but as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate with this beer, there's quite a little bit of an oily, limey character coming out of this one. It does have a good little bit of, there's a wee bit of an orangey note to this one for me as well, and I'm getting a wee bit of gooseberry as well. I think Citra is highly plausible with this one. I'm pretty sure there's still a bit of Citra in this because I'm getting the gooseberry and slightly lychee kind of note. There's also a good little bit of lime in there, like I said, and then just behind the very front tip of your tongue where you start to get into the grassy notes, there is a wee bit of a lemony character too. But yeah, this beer really does make me wonder a bit about cashmere because of the limey and kind of melony notes that it has, particularly into the aftertaste. Yeah, that's a really interesting beer, this one. It certainly made me think a wee bit. I don't know if we really need to say anything else about the flavour. I think I've said everything I really want to about that. So let's just round off this review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, mouthfeel wise, this beer is it's actually quite a thick one, this. You're pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. Carbonation is very, very smooth. It's a big oily beer, this one, for sure. It probably is full-bodied, yeah, bottom end of full-bodied I would stick with. Carbonation is very smooth, oily and slick, like I said. In terms of IBUs, I think this one is a bit higher. I think this is maybe about a 50 or 60 IBU IPA, which again puts it in the American IPA category rather than New England, because you want to be around the 30 mark or 40 mark with a double down there. But yeah, as we said, the malt base has a bit of graininess underneath, a bit of smoothness in the middle, and quite a little bit of sweetness on top. The fruity character is really quite oily, as we said too, but yeah, just a bit oily and sweet take on the IPA, but definitely has a wee bit of the kind of creamy character that you would expect of a New England too. So American IPA, I think, is the style category that suits this beer best. But I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Fortune Raider, an 8.3% double IPA from Armada Brewing in New Haven here in Connecticut. Really cool to be able to cover this brewery for you here on the channel, and we'll see what we can find from these guys as time goes on. But yeah, I want to try things from lots of different breweries. We'll just see what we get. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Armada Brewing Company as well. And we will see about doing more reviews from them soon. We might even manage to get down to New Haven and do a little, pardon me, out and about video at their tap room. We just need to see what happens over my time here in Connecticut. Thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Sláinte, skål, and cheers.